Good morning. Today's lecture will be on the roles of the safety officer during an incident. Well, the topics we'll be covering today will be scene safety consideration, special operations, the role prior to the incident, the role during the incident, the challenges that the safety officer will be facing, and more importantly, what are the roles following for the safety officer after the incident. During all large incidents, the incident commander is ultimately responsible for the whole operation, especially during large complex incidents. Safety responsibilities are broad. It's delegated from the incident commander down. NFPA 1521 defines the safety officer role. Incident safety officer and health and safety officers are out there to protect the firefighters and make sure everybody is safe during a large scale or all type of operations. More firefighters are injured and killed on scene, and we have to stop that and prevent that from happening. Having a safety officer will reduce the injuries and deaths for firefighters. During the incident commander set up their command staff. Safety officers is one of the first primary positions that need to be appointed right away. This position and these duties of the position make all our jobs a lot safer and easier. What are some of the duties of the safety officer? Scene rehabilitation and is initiated and sustained. What that means is when you get to a scene of a large-scale incident, rehabilitation officers starts getting set up. We're getting water, we're getting the firefighters' blood pressures, so we make sure everybody's safe during the operation. The safety officer also monitors conditions and the hazards associated with the building or the vehicle with the hazardous materials. The safety officer is constantly monitoring the whole scene and see what the safety of the incident's going on. Personnel accountability. That's where he makes sure that all the firefighters are handing in over their tags, and he has accountability of what firefighters are inside the complex or what firefighters are doing what, to make sure they're all accounted for. Ensuring an understanding for the incident action plan. The IAP will be your game plan, is your strategy for the next period. That safety officer is going to make sure that operation is safe for that period. It could be a long process where we're looking for a lost hiker. You're going to be needing a safety officer to make sure that everybody's safe for that period of time when we're out in the woods looking for that lost person. Risk assessment. That safety officer is going to be doing an assessment of the building, make sure that building conditions are safe. He'll be doing complete risk assessments. Identify safety, collapse, and hot zones. If he's looking at a structure, he's going to be setting up the area where the fire apparatus should be placed so nothing happens if there is a collapse. We're safe. That's the role of the safety officer. Monitoring vehicle traffic. More firefighters are hurt and injured on scenes of motor vehicle accidents because we're not setting up traffic cones. We're not setting up traffic patterns to protect ourselves. The safety officer will monitor that to make sure we're working in conjunction with the local PD, the police department, to make sure that their traffic patterns are set up to go bypass us so we're not getting hit by autos. Monitor radio communications. They're going to be making sure that there's no maydays being thrown out, that the incident commander can hear stuff. The safety officer will make sure that he's listening to all the operation or the people who are on the hand lines to make sure that they're all safe. And if he has to identify maybe needing an additional safety officer. If you're working on a 15-story high-rise, you might need 3, 4 different safety officers to work in conjunction with the main safety officer to tell them what's going on each one of the floors. And obviously the big one is evaluate aircraft operations. If we'll be working on the airfield, to make sure that the firefighters are safe, to be watching the planes land and take off, and we'll make sure everybody's safe. One of the things we're going to talk about right now is the scene safety considerations. What are those considerations that are going through a safety officer's mind during the operation? A special knowledge a safety officer should possess will be firefighter strategy and tactics. It will be useful for our safety officer to understand the department's SOPs and SOGs, to understand the standard operational procedure of that local fire department and in the mutual aid departments coming in, to understand how we're going to pull lines, what hoses are going to be pulled, and things of that nature. Good thing for a safety officer to understand is building construction. He's going to have to know what a wood frame construction, how fires affect wood frame compared to a heavy timber, compared to a masonry building. That safety officer is going to have to understand and know the knowledge of the construction, so when he's at the scene, he can protect us a lot better. Fire behavior and fire loads. This is all part of what a safety officer should be studying and learning about. How to forcible entry. How does a firefighter enter a forcible entry into a building safely? They're going to have to learn that and actually maybe go to academies and take other lectures and understand how to do forcible entry. Ventilation. When do you ventilate? How do you ventilate? This will all make the safety officer's job a lot easier if he has a good understanding of that. Self-contained breathing apparatus and the PPE usage, especially during a hazmat incident. One of the safety officers should have a great understanding of personal protective equipment during a hazmat incident. What equipment, what level of equipment should be done and should be worn. Climatic conditions, weather conditions. Right now, and we're dealing with hot and humid weather. If you're outside and it's sub-zero weather, safety officers are going to have to understand that affects the weather condition on the firefighter safety during the operation. Where we're putting ladders, how we're setting ladders up at the fire scene. To make sure that we know we're putting ladders in a proper location for egress if we have to bail out on the second floor or third floor. And the big issue is establishing controlling zones. Hot zones, cold zones during hazmat incidents, and collapse zones during structural fires to make sure that we're all set up in good locations so no one gets hurt and no one gets injured. As I mentioned before, the incident commander needs to select a safety officer. But what are the characteristics that a safety officer should be? This is a person that the incident commander has the utmost respect for and has the utmost knowledge of the fire service to understand what needs to be done and how to be done safely. Not everybody can be fit into that role as a safety officer. So that's why it's important that the incident commander selects someone prior to all incidents, knowing who's going to be the safety officer. Education, constantly reading and updating your manuals on safety operations, on building construction, and things of that matter that will make it easier for the incident commander to select who's going to be the safety officer. Safety officer's role on scene consideration. First is fire loads. How much is the maximum heat being produced inside that building, inside that fire? Other things he's going to know about fire loads are the target hazards and the fire load potentials. And the last but not least, knowledgeable aid operations, how we're going to handle that heavy fire load. Forcible entry, part of the safety officer's responsibility, is understanding techniques. How to forcible entry a door properly so you don't get hurt. There's no backdraft on a firefighter. And understand the hazards of opening up doors and opening up windows during an operation. As I was mentioning earlier, one of the roles a safety officer is going to be considering is on ventilation. He has to understand the ventilation principles. He has to understand the effects of improper ventilation, how it will affect the firefighters inside on the hand line. And thirdly, understand the negative and positive pressure ventilation. What will the effects of that? Negative, positive pressure ventilation, if it's done improperly, could actually hurt and kill firefighters inside that building. Evacuation procedures. Essentially, all types of incidents, we need to understand how to evacuate the firefighters. Understanding the policy that your community has. Ordering an evacuation. How does that evacuation gets ordered from the incident commander? Is it 2 blasts of the horn, 3 blasts of the horn, whatever? That safety officer is going to have to understand that policy and know that policy. Notifying and using personnel effectively. This is where we start to use rapid intervention teams and your RIT teams. We have to start evacuating firefighters. And establishing a relocation area. We have an area out nearby, so we do evacuate. The safety officer can do an accountability of those firefighters who are taken out. Other things the safety officer is going to do during evacuations is make sure the building is laddered properly. Make sure there is a ladder for the second means of egress for the firefighters on the second floor. Self-contained breathing apparatus and personal protective equipment, SCBA and PPE. That safety officer for this community has to understand the policy for the community on their SCBA rules. We have federal guidelines, we have state guidelines. The safety officer should be a good understanding of what each policy is. Should be wearing a mask at all times. But make sure that it enforces that at all incidents, that make sure all the firefighters are wearing their masks and their personal protective equipment. Climatic conditions. Weather has an adverse effect on us as firefighters. Maintain constant awareness of the changing temperatures. Extreme temperatures and humidity. It's a very difficult thing to do. Make sure the firefighters are hydrated properly during the hot and humid weather. Freezing rain and snow. Obviously, you get hypothermia during the cold weather. You make sure that they're all warm, have a warm area when they come out. There's a place where they can stand by and stay warm when they're getting rehabbed. And high winds. Make sure that there's no high winds because things get blown off roofs, tree branches can come down and hit firefighters. So during all types of weather conditions, the safety officer has to have a good understanding of what negative effects could that weather condition be on us firefighters. During the incident commander will tell the aerial operations to set up ground ladders, to set up the aerial. The safety officer has to understand where the placement of these aerials are going to be. Up against the building. Is it in the collapse zone? These are things that the safety officer has to walk around and monitor and make sure that they're in a safe area for operation. Ensuring safe, as I said before, ensuring safety ground ladders to the second floor so a firefighter has immediate egress to get out on the second floor. Establishing control zones. This is a big issue for the fire safety officer. This allows for personnel accountability. Collapse zones are based on building height and construction type, and control zones aid in the scene management. Safety officer can actually help the scene management with these control zones to make sure nobody's working in dangerous situations in case there's potential collapse. Today's fire service isn't like our grandparents. We have totally different new operations that we're responding to. Hazardous material incidents, emergency medical and mass casualties, tech rescue, confined space, structural collapse, high angle, extrication. These are all new things that we're facing now today in the fire service. Hazardous material incidents. What is the safety officer's role in a hazmat incident? He's going to making sure that we're wearing the proper PPE. He's getting a good understanding of the chemicals that we're facing and to make sure that these chemicals aren't doing damage to our equipment that we're using and to protect us. The emergency medical and mass casualty, to make sure there was no disease being presented, no HIV, no bloodborne pathogens are being exposed to us. Mass casualty, we have potentials now for terrorist events with mass casualty operation. The safety officers got to understand how to get all these casualties to the hospitals and make sure they're all done safely. Tech rescue, confined space, make sure the firefighter is not going in an area that's unsafe. Make sure he has enough oxygen going down in there. Structural collapse, make sure there's not additional collapses going on or we're trying to get the victims out. High angle rope rescue and extrication. These are all new things that the safety officers are going to have a good understanding about, so we're doing this operation safely. Where does it require us to have safety officers? Well, each municipality has state laws we have to follow and are mandated by. Check your state, make sure you're mandated to have one and to set one up. OSHA requires it during certain operations. I know during hazardous material operations, you got to have a safety officer. And the National Fire Protection Association also requires you to have a safety officer. These are requirements that dictate to us that we need to have it. And an overall safety of the firefighters, it's a great practice to continue having one. If you're assigned as a safety officer by an incident commander or a chief of department, what are some of your roles that you're going to be doing? You're going to identify high hazards and risk locations in your community to make sure if you have a good pre-plan of that specific facility. Review and develop a pre-incident plan for that facility. Review and develop standard operations procedures that pertain to certain locations where there will be a high risk to the firefighter. Ensure adoption and implementation of the incident management system. And make sure everybody understands the ICS system and where your role is in that ICS system. Conduct research and developing related to firefighter strategy and tactics. When your community has so many potentials, you as a safety officer are going to have to go out and actually study that community to make sure that you can get better strategy and tactics for the incident commander and make sure it's done safely. Safety best management practices. What are the best practices? There's so many different trains of thought in the fire service, but you have to take that specific management theory and make it to your community to make sure that you're operationally safe. And other technologies are out there. Are the use of cameras, are the use of thermal imaging cameras, the use of computers. How is this going to make your job as a safety officer easier and make it safer for the firefighters on the scene? We discussed all different aspects of the safety officer, who's required, how you're going to have it, how's it all set up, but what are exactly the roles of the safety officer at the scene, the important part? Well, that safety officer has to coordinate with the incident commander on the operations. The constant communication between the incident commander and the safety officer is essential to make sure you have a good operation going on. He has to understand the incident action plan if there's going to be one for the next 24-hour period to make sure the operation is safe and that we're all protected. Conduct the incident safety size-up to make sure the building's safe, whether there's going to be any collapses in it. When you get there and you're assigned to the safety officer, you might have to do a 360 around that building. Then look at all the structures, look at the windows, look at the roof, look at the walls, and make sure everything's safe that we're facing. Report that size-up information to the incident commander, because now he can start doing better strategy and tactics with your safety information that you're giving to him or her. Establish control zones, as we mentioned before, during a hazardous material incidents, setting up control zones of the hot, warm, and cold, setting up that collapse zone to make sure that we're safe, setting up the rehab center to make sure that we come out, we have a place that we can rehab and hydrate properly. Establish rapid intervention teams. Do we need a RIT team? When is that going to be set up? Where is it going to be set up? That's all part of the safety officer's responsibility. Provide advanced and challenging conditions. If you as a safety officer, you realize things are getting worse as they're progressively going on during the operation, you got to notify that to the incident commander and tell him that the challenges that he's going to be facing. Monitor communications. I mentioned before, you're going to be listening to all the operations on the people on the hands line, people up on a roof, people inside the building. So you're going to make sure that everything is going on and that operation is safe. Monitor vehicle traffic. Make sure we're not being hit by cars and traffic flow patterns around us so we're all protected. And continually assess the risk of the operation. Make sure that we continually go on and on throughout the operation that we're all safe and the risks are controlled. What are the challenges that we as safety officers will be facing? One of them is to recognize how conditions are changing. You got to monitor, make sure the primary search is completed, that you hear that on the radio. Understand if the fire has been knocked down, and if the fire has been got greater or intense inside the building. Patient extrication is completed, that the patients have been removed from the vehicles and on the ambulances going to the hospital. And make sure the hazardous, and you will find out the hazardous materials have been contained and confined to that one location. Manage the risk. That's the important thing that the fire safety officer has to understand. One of the things you can do is use effective interpersonal skills to talk to the people at the scene to understand what's going on. Talk to the incident commander. Enforce accountability. Make sure everybody has their accountability tags handed in. So if you do have to do a count, you know how many firefighters are still inside the building and where they're located. Effectively support operations. You, as a safety officer, you're going to support that operation in a way that makes sure that everybody is safe, and the incident commander can do his strategy and tactics in a safe and quick manner. And plan for any additional resources. You, as safety officer, you might have to tell that incident commander you might need a second or third strike team coming in or additional units coming into the operation. That's all part of the safety officer's challenges that he has to understand and assist with the incident commander. Now that you're back in the firehouse and your role still as a safety officer continues, what am I doing now? Well, after the incident, the safety officer has to do any post-incident analysis and reports. Unfortunately, you might have to injury or death report you're going to have to fill out and get to the state. Identify of corrective actions for future incidents. If things weren't done safely, this is a time for you as safety officer to tell the incident commander or the chief of department that things have to be changed and this is what needs to be done. At this incident, this is what we learned. Any violations of the department's SOPs, you bring up to the chief of department or the incident commander that this is what we saw at that operation. If it's a poorly defined procedure, some of them are, that we can learn from our mistakes and make sure it was done, and we can bring it back to the incident commander and the chief that these decisions were made weren't the best at the time. And unforeseen conditions. There are operations or something could happen later on that we weren't ready for. So now we could go back and discuss this as a safety officer. There's something we weren't ready to see that happen and that did occur. A lot of times in the wildlands that happens. So we got to make sure that we go back and discuss that. And the big issue is training deficiencies. What do we need to train on? We just came back from a hazmat incident, and I noticed that the safety officer, our guys weren't prepared properly on handling a spill. So that means we need to do better training on awareness and operations of hazardous materials. This is the time where the safety officer makes the suggestions to the chief of department that this is what we need to be done, and this is how the corrective action so we all can work safe. Bottom line is for all safety officers that everybody goes to the fire, all comes home together. That's our goal as safety officers. We just been discussing the roles of the safety officer. Now I want to quickly go over what are the potentials that we face as firefighters when we get injured and hurt. One of the major causes is motor vehicle accidents, as I was saying before. The traffic patterns aren't being set up properly while we're working in operations of car fires or car accidents, and we're getting hurt and killed on the highways. Other ones is cardiovascular. We have to get ourselves in better shape. We're doing very physical fitness positions and jobs, so we need to be at a level where our hearts can handle it. It's up to the safety officer to start getting some physical fitness programs out there to the firehouses so the firefighters can follow along. One of the things that we do face all the time is lost and disoriented in the fire structures. That's where the safety officer is going to have to start doing more training, getting training done for the firefighters in fire mazes, in burn buildings, so we get practice on actually stretching hose and crawling through the heat and smoke during the operation. Other things that kill us are major fires, backdrafts, and flashovers and structural collapses. This is stuff that we have to keep our eyes on at all times as safety officers to make sure that we're at the safe operation. Trauma, falls, lacerations, and burns. We have to make sure that we're wearing our proper protection equipment. The safety officer is going to have to make sure that we're using the proper equipment and using the equipment properly so we're not getting burned and not getting hurt with the equipment. And the big thing is infectious disease. We're making sure we're using our gloves, wearing gloves properly, wearing masks at car accidents, and so we're going back, we're not getting the infectious diseases. These are things that the safety officer will be doing not only at the scene, but with the fire department after the operation or before the operation, that we have these policies. This is all part of what the safety officers should be doing. Now you just listen to this complete lecture. Now you're saying to yourself, you know what, I want to make a difference. I want to go become a safety officer. So you go to the chief of department or your office and say, at the next structure, can I be the incident safety officer? What do I have to know? What do I have to get? Is there any certifications? There's no really certifications out there, but there's different courses that you can take. The National Fire Academy has a course on the incident safety officer. FEMA has safety officer courses. There's an organization, the Federal Fire Department Safety Officers Association. They have the information that makes you a better safety officer. So there's your state and local county academies. They all have courses on safety officers. And if they don't, ask them to get them. FEMA people and the National Fire Academy instructors will come up and gladly offer this knowledge that they have on this. So it's up to you to go to get that information, and it will make you and your department's jobs a lot easier. Is there a liability not to have a safety officer? I would say yes. How can you actually go to a structure fire and not have someone out there watching us and protecting us? So the liability is out there. So it's up to you to make sure our jobs are safe.